Everyone in the hall laughed. Not the polite kind of laughter either. It was sharp, sudden, and heavy, like a slap that echoed before you could even process the pain. The clinking of glasses stopped. Forks froze mid-air. All eyes turned toward me, then back to him. My father. He stood there in his tailored suit, wineglass raised high, lips curled into a smile that looked proud, confident, untouchable. A man who had spent his entire life believing his words carried weight simply because he spoke them. "I never thought," he said loudly, "that my daughter would ever get engaged." More laughter. I felt my fiancé's hand tighten around mine. His thumb brushed against my skin. A silent question. "Are you okay?" I wasn't. "But then again," my father continued, leaning slightly forward as if sharing a secret with the room, "miracles do happen. Because honestly, I used to think no man would ever want her." The room erupted. Some people laughed because they didn't know what else to do. Some because they thought it was a joke. Some because cruelty feels lighter when shared. My mother didn't look at me. She stared at her plate like it held answers she had been avoiding for decades. I smiled. That was the strange part. I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt. It did. It felt like something inside me cracked open quietly. But I smiled because at that exact moment, standing there under soft lights and fake applause, I realized something. He had no idea who I was anymore, and he definitely had no idea what I knew. My father had always been like this, charming in public, sharp in private. Growing up, I learned early that love in our house was conditional, praise was rare, approval was earned, and even then, temporary. "You're too sensitive. You're not trying hard enough. Why can't you be more like..." Like who? I never knew. I just knew I was always falling short of some invisible standard he had set long before I was born. When I got into university on a scholarship, he said it was luck. When I graduated top of my class, he said the program wasn't that competitive. When I got my first job, he asked how long before they realized I wasn't good enough. And when I met the man standing beside me that night, kind, steady, patient, my father said nothing at all. Until this toast. The applause faded. Music resumed. People went back to eating, drinking, pretending nothing had happened. I excused myself. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. Same face, same calm expression, but behind my eyes was a quiet resolve that had been building for months. Because while my father thought I was still the insecure girl desperate for his approval, I had been uncovering truths he assumed were buried forever. It had started accidentally. A locked drawer in his study, a folder labeled with a company name I didn't recognize, numbers that didn't add up, late-night phone calls he thought no one noticed. At first, I ignored it. Then, curiosity turned into concern, concern into research, research into something far bigger than I ever imagined. My father's success, the wealth, the respect, the power he wielded so casually, wasn't as clean as he claimed. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized the man who humiliated me publicly was standing on a foundation made of lies. I splashed water on my face and took a deep breath. Tonight wasn't the night, but it was coming. I walked back into the hall, rejoined my fiancé, and squeezed his hand back this time. He looked at me, searching my face. "You okay?" he whispered. I leaned closer and smiled again, this time for real. "More than you know." Because my father had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had underestimated me one last time. The night of the engagement passed the way storms often do. Loud at first, then deceptively calm, leaving damage that only becomes visible later. My father acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He laughed with guests, posed for photos, clapped my fiancé on the back like a man who had just delivered a brilliant punchline instead of a calculated humiliation. On the drive home, he even hummed softly, pleased with himself. I watched him from the passenger seat, studying the lines on his face, the confidence in his posture. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. I was curious. Over the following weeks, I played my role perfectly. The obedient daughter, the excited bride. I invited my parents to wedding planning meetings, sent them venue photos, asked for opinions I had no intention of following. My father mistook silence for submission. He always had. Meanwhile, my nights belonged to something else entirely. The locked drawer in his study was easier the second time. I already knew where the spare key was hidden, inside the old dictionary he never opened anymore. He still believed I was careless, inattentive, incapable of noticing patterns. That belief was my greatest advantage. Inside the drawer were documents that didn't belong to a man with nothing to hide. Company registrations under shell names, bank transfers routed through accounts overseas, contracts signed by people who technically didn't exist. Everything neat, everything precise. The kind of mess only intelligent people make when they think they're untouchable. I photographed everything. At first, I didn't fully understand what I was looking at, so I did what I had learned to do my entire life. I worked harder. I researched laws, traced paper trails, cross-referenced dates. Slowly, the picture sharpened. My father's empire wasn't built on brilliance alone. It was built on shortcuts, manipulation, and one particularly ugly secret that tied everything together. A business partner from years ago, a man whose name never came up anymore. A man who had taken the fall for a scandal my father orchestrated. That man was my fiancé's uncle. I remember the night it clicked. I was sitting at my desk, surrounded by notes, when I pulled up an old article. Same year, same company, same numbers, different outcome. One man disgraced and ruined, the other rising faster than ever. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from clarity. Fate had an odd sense of humor. I told my fiancé everything. I expected anger, shock, maybe even doubt. Instead, he listened quietly. When I finished, he exhaled slowly and said, "I always knew there was more to that story." That was when he told me his side. How his uncle had never defended himself, how he'd taken responsibility to protect his family, how the stress destroyed his health, how the truth had died with him, or so everyone thought. We sat there in silence, the weight of generations pressing down on us. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. I looked at him and realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about rewriting a story that had been twisted for far too long. I contacted a lawyer, not just any lawyer, one who specialized in financial crimes and quiet investigations. I didn't tell him whose daughter I was. I told him what I had. His expression changed about 10 minutes in. "This," he said carefully, "is enough to ruin someone." I nodded. Good. Wedding plans continued. Invitations went out. My father insisted on paying for everything. Another mistake. Every transaction added another thread to the web. He loved control, loved being the provider, loved believing everyone needed him. He never imagined the day would come when all of it would be used against him. At dinner one night, he asked casually, "You seem more confident lately." I smiled. "I've learned a lot." He laughed, unaware that the clock had started ticking. The closer the wedding got, the more relaxed he became. He gave speeches about family, loyalty, legacy. He practiced walking me down the aisle in front of the mirror, rehearsing the image of the proud father. I let him, because some performances deserve a full audience, and mine was almost ready. The lawyer called on a Tuesday morning. I remember because it was raining, the kind of steady rain that makes the world feel suspended, like everything is waiting for permission to move forward. "We're ready," he said. 2 words, that was all. For weeks, everything had been happening quietly, deliberately. Subpoenas prepared, but not served. Accounts traced, but not frozen. Statements drafted, but not released. Every move calculated to ensure that when the truth surfaced, it wouldn't whisper, it would land. I hung up the phone and sat there for a long moment, hands folded in my lap. This was the point of no return. That evening, my parents invited us over for dinner. My father cooked himself, another performance. He poured wine generously, joked loudly, told stories about his early struggles, carefully edited versions where he was always the hero. Halfway through the meal, he turned to my fiancée. "You're a lucky man," he said, smiling. She's improved." My fiancé met his gaze calmly. "She's always been exceptional." Something flickered across my father's face. Surprise, then amusement. I watched it all, detached, almost peaceful. After dinner, my father asked me to help him in his study. I followed him in, heart steady. The room smelled like leather and old paper. Power lived here, or at least it used to. He leaned against his desk and looked at me for a long moment. "You've changed," he said again, this time more seriously. "So have you," I replied. He laughed. "No, I'm exactly the same. That's why I'm successful." I tilted my head. "Is that what you think?" His smile faded slightly. "What are you implying?" I met his eyes. "Nothing, just asking." He studied me, suspicion finally creeping in, too late. Then he waved it off, dismissing the thought the same way he had dismissed me my entire life. "Don't overthink things. It never suited you." I left the study with my back straight. 3 days later, everything began to unravel. First, a call from his bank, then another, then a meeting he came home from early, furious, blaming incompetence and bureaucracy. He paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice sharp. "They're overreaching," he snapped. "I've done nothing wrong." My mother sat quietly, hands folded, eyes lowered. By the end of the week, the tone changed. His voice dropped, his movements slowed. He stopped sleeping. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen. "Did you say something?" he asked abruptly. I looked up from my phone. "About what?" "You know exactly what," he said, eyes narrowing. I shrugged. Should I? For the first time, I saw fear in him. Not panic, fear. The kind that comes when a man realizes control is slipping through his fingers. The investigation became public the following Monday. News articles, speculation, words like alleged, under scrutiny, historic irregularities, his name everywhere, no longer followed by praise, but by question marks. The phone stopped ringing. Invitations disappeared. Friends vanished. He watched the coverage in silence, jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly at his sides. That night, he didn't eat, didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. I passed his study and saw the drawer open, papers scattered, his illusion of order finally broken. He knew. The wedding was 2 weeks away, and he still believed, somehow, that he could fix it, that he could fix everything. But the truth has a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment, and ours was approaching faster than he realized. The day my father was officially summoned arrived quietly. No dramatic knock, no flashing lights, just an envelope handed to him at his office by someone who wouldn't meet his eyes. He came home early again, this time without his jacket, tie loosened, face drained of color. He sat at the dining table and stared at the paper for a long time. My mother finally spoke. "What does it say?" He didn't answer. I poured myself a glass of water and took a seat across from him. For years, I had sat at that same table listening to his judgments, his lectures, his disappointment. The balance had shifted, and we both felt it. "It's a misunderstanding," he said finally, voice rough. "These things happen when you're successful." I nodded slowly. "Do they?" He looked up sharply. Our eyes locked. For the first time, he saw it. Not fear, not uncertainty. Certainty. "You," he said quietly. "You know something." I didn't deny it. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "What have you done?" I folded my hands. I told the truth. His face twisted, anger, betrayal, disbelief colliding all at once. "After everything I've done for you!" I almost laughed. "You mean after everything you've taken?" I replied calmly. He slammed his hand on the table. "I built this family." "You built yourself," I said, "and you used people to do it." Silence fell like a blade. His shoulders sagged slightly. "You don't understand how the world works." I leaned forward. "I understand exactly how it works. I just chose not to play your role anymore." The wedding rehearsals began the next day. Guests arrived from out of town. Relatives whispered in corners. My father avoided public appearances, claiming exhaustion. The proud man who once loved the spotlight now flinched at every notification on his phone. He still insisted on walking me down the aisle. "I won't be humiliated," he told my mother. "Not like this." I said nothing. The lawyer called again. "The testimony is airtight. If this goes to trial, it will be devastating." "When?" I asked. "Very soon." The night before the wedding, my father knocked on my door. I hadn't heard him knock in years. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around my room as if seeing it for the first time. Photos, books, quiet proof of a life I built without him. "He made mistakes," he said, "but everything I did was for this family." I met his gaze. "No, you did it for control, for applause." His jaw tightened. "If this comes out tomorrow—" "It will," I said gently. He swallowed hard. "You're going to destroy me." I shook my head. "No, I'm stepping out of your shadow." He stared at me, searching for the weak girl he raised. She was gone. He left without another word. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and clear. The venue buzzed with excitement. Music drifted through the air. Guests smiled, unaware that they were about to witness more than a ceremony. I stood in my dress, calm, grounded. This wasn't revenge. This was release. And it was time. The ceremony began on time. Guests rose from their seats as the music swelled, cameras lifted, smiles spread across faces that had no idea they were about to watch two stories collide, one ending, one finally beginning. My father stood at the front, stiff, composed by sheer force of habit. His smile was practiced, but his eyes betrayed him. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not because he had changed, but because I had. When the doors opened and I stepped inside, the room softened. Every breath slowed, every head turned. I didn't look at him. I walked forward alone. The whisper started almost immediately, confusion rippling through the rows. I passed him without stopping, without touching his arm, without offering him the role he had demanded for decades. I heard him murmur my name. I didn't turn. At the altar, my fiancé took my hands. His grip was steady, grounding. The officiant paused, uncertain, sensing the shift in the room. Before he could speak, I did. "I'd like to say something first." Gasps, murmurs, my mother's sharp inhale. I turned, slowly, deliberately, and faced the audience and my father. "Today was supposed to be about beginnings," I said calmly, "and it is, but not the kind some people expected." My father took a step forward. "This isn't the time." "It is," I said, my voice steady. "It's exactly the time." The room fell silent. For most of my life, I was told I wasn't enough, not smart enough, not impressive enough, not worthy enough. I looked directly at him now. Those words didn't come from strangers. They came from the person who was supposed to protect me. His face drained of color. "I believed him," I said, "until I learned the truth about who he really was, about what it cost others for him to stand where he stands." I nodded slightly. That was the signal. The lawyer stood from the back row and walked forward, documents in hand. Quiet, professional, unavoidable. "This wedding," I said, "will still happen, but it won't happen under a lie." Security stepped in gently but firmly. Phones came out. Whispers turned into shock. My father didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just stood there, exposed. As he was escorted out, he finally looked at me, not with anger, not with pride, but with the realization that the power he had wielded for so long was gone. Not taken, released. The ceremony resumed. Simpler, lighter, honest. When we were pronounced married, the applause wasn't forced. It was real. Later, as the sun dipped low and laughter filled the space where fear once lived, my mother approached me. "I should have protected you," she said softly. I hugged her. "We're here now." That night, as I stood beside my husband, watching the stars come out one by one, I thought about that toast, the words meant to shrink me. No man would want her. He was wrong, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need him to admit it. I already knew.